You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to Product Coalition. Today, we're cutting through the noise on growth, not with another shiny app, but with the thing that actually scales, and that's systems. If you felt that tech alone keeps missing the mark, this one's going to be for you. Our guest is Val Coin, digital transformation specialist at VIA Technology. She and her team build future-proof systems for scale and growth using proven transformation principles and human-centered design. Now, Val specializes in change management, operational diagnostics, and people-first tech adoption. Her team turns complexity into clarity, making transformation practical, human, and surprisingly empowering. Originally from Italy and now based in Queensland's Sunshine Coast, Val brings warmth, curiosity, and a European eye for detail that the kind that connects the dots and maybe others would miss. We're going to unpack why software isn't a silver bullet and where leaders should focus instead. When to systemize, making sure it's not too early and not too late. We're going to dig into how to support teams through change without breaking pace, how to design systems that survive new tools, new hires, new markets, and why an executive dashboard isn't a vanity wall, it's the control room for all of your growth. You'll get stories and simple frameworks from service businesses through to enterprise. You'll hear how leaders can lean on systems with confidence and how a future-proofed approach to system thinking and doing drives performance, profit, and incredible culture. Val, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jay. It's a pleasure.
I'm really excited to get into this conversation today, Val, around systems. The last, called it 3 to 4 years, the idea of growth at any cost has died away, and businesses are much more focused around their productivity ratios across teams. But before we jump into that, Val, why is this domain something that you're so passionate about?
A very, very good question to start from. In a previous life, in a previous role, together with my husband, we were actually leading a product team. We were building software and technologies for the disability sector here in Australia. And what I learned through that experience was that no matter how good the software was, no matter how good the technology, and no matter how good the implementation and the project management was, the kicker really came in the interaction between the technology, the people, and the business processes. And obviously, as a software vendor, you can't really have an impact on organizational change and on how business systems are designed and operated. You only can really play with your technology. And so this is why we really started VIA, to really bridge those three domains and make sure that businesses grow without the hype, without tech as the silver bullet, but just really in a sustainable, solid, and almost boring way, if you will.
Nice. Well, if tech is not the silver bullet, and it's definitely not, a company is nothing without its people, can I ask, Val, what are some of your first principles when it comes to systemizing businesses before we get into individual specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I gave away some of it already. So one of the principles is very proven, very boring. It's systems. The way we call systems is they're made up of process, people, and technology working together. Think about it as a three-legged stool. If you just focus on the one leg, the stool will fall down. So that's our first principle that we look at. The second probably is we really want leaders to start from clarity. And so starting with a strategic angle, what is the problem that we are solving? What's the outcome that we are driving towards? Answering those questions will define what the North Star for whatever we're about to do is, whether it's a project, whether it's a software implementation, whatever that may be. And having a North Star is really going to help us answer all of the questions that come up along the way. Probably those two, I would say, are the two main principles that we encourage leaders to apply when we're talking about systemizing business. The third element that I will mention is more of a principle that I apply myself, and that's always using curiosity. I always assume there's a good reason for what is happening, whether it is tech resistance, whether it is delays in a project. I always assume there's a good reason for it, and I'm curious about it because there might be a nugget of truth there that we need to explore.
Nice. I like that. I like that. When we've got our North Star and we've got our curiosity, my next question is, what is the indicators that leaders should be looking for that demonstrate a process maybe needs review, auditing, development for improvement? What do those things typically look like? And you obviously work with a wide range of different business types.
Yes. So what we're looking for is the canary in the mines, right? We want those early indicators that something's not quite right. And most of the common ones that we see are, some are people related and some are tech related. I would say probably one of the first things would be if there is a high turnover in key roles. So your operations manager, your general manager, sometimes your finance manager, and your admin person, the person that holds together the office, the team, the operations of your business. If there's high turnover in that role, that tells me something's broken in the system. And linked to that, you might have some friction when onboarding or offboarding team members. And the kicker there is typically there is this one person that holds all the knowledge in the business. And when they leave, they take that knowledge with them. It's not documented anywhere. Nobody knows because Mary used to do it. And so when you bring on the new role, you're suddenly going to find yourself with a lot of friction and a lot of, how is it that we actually do this? So those are probably the people-related red flags that we want to pay attention to. When it comes to tech, it's very common to see tool sprawl. So a lot of different platforms, you start a good solid system and then start adding software here, a software there, a little, there's a little tool to do this particular piece of the puzzle. And then you add on top of it shadow IT, which is basically your team members going, yes, I know we have a software for editing videos, but actually there is this free one online that works better. It's a little bit faster. Let me use it. And it's just a mess at that point. So that's almost the end result. The early signal is teams not engaging with the technology that you provide them. And that's why they go and find their shadow systems. So as I said earlier, I always like to pay attention to tech resistance. Sometimes it's behavioral, but sometimes it reveals to us that there is something we need to pay attention to deep beneath the surface.
Nice. I like that term, shadow systems, that you use, and it's probably the type of thing that no one likes to talk about, but it exists in every business. And I think probably now, because of AI tool development, more so in the last 2 to 3 years, possibly than ever before. Coming back to systems and processes that you mentioned, there's obviously a key point in a business's growth when systemizing can unlock new value internally, and therefore create more time for high value work. At what stage in a process should you be investing in systemizing? Because it's obviously hard to calculate an ROI of when should we stop what we're doing, systemize, and then come back to it because we'll reap the benefit, versus let's just keep going until it breaks.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, right? And I have over there the multiple different frameworks for stages of business. If I take Vern Harnish, for example, you've got your startup, your scale up, your grow up first, your scale up after, and then you either reach a plateau, you descend down into, no, that's not where we're going, or you can keep growing, right? And typically it is in those transition stages that we see businesses and business leaders start to look at systemization. So the trickiest one in a way is between startup and grow up, because there's going to be a temptation of wanting to lock processes and lock the way we do things in. And to a degree, it's a little bit too early to do so, because we still want to be able to be flexible and respond to the demands of the market and be able to pivot if we need to. Whereas when we go to the next stage, when we've grown the business and we've started stretching our resources and we're very, very clear on who our target audience is, who do we serve, what do we deliver for them, and what are our values and what are our driving principles as a business. Now, that's the moment in which we can really, truly systemize, lock in the way we do the things that we do, so that we can properly scale and enter that next phase. So the golden moment is between grow up and scale up as business phases. We want to reduce that reliance on A players. So typically up until this stage as a business, we would have grown with the support of brilliant A players who have helped us figure out who the business is and what the business does. But we want to be very careful not to over rely on them, as I mentioned earlier, because just in case, they want to move to another role or move to another country. And so we want to be able to create those repeatable processes, very solid systems designed so that if my A player stays within my organization, they're going to be able to actually elevate their role and take a more strategic approach and have a look at how can I keep growing the business. And if they do exit and we need to bring in somebody else new, we can easily place someone in that role because everything is documented. We have the right alignment with our values and we have the right tools to do the job.
Thank you. When it comes to change this year, we're recording this at the start of 2026. A lot of listeners will be seeing change on their roadmaps expected to be delivered in this coming year. The intentionality of change is obviously critically important, but for many employees who are affected by change, sometimes change can feel like change for change's sake, and the benefits to them or the organization is often forgotten about due to the excitement of getting the change done. Execution is everything. So I'd love to hear, what are some of those first principles around change management and communication as you work with businesses to implement new or improve systems?
Yep. So one of the critical pieces of the puzzle in our perspective, and a lot of businesses aren't excited about change management, as you mentioned, Jay. They're excited about the new technology we're bringing in or the new level of efficiency and automation that we can have. But teams and leaders especially are rarely excited about change. So two of the most important things that we could do at the beginning is, one, be really clear on why this change matters. Not just what is going to change, but why are we changing? What's that North Star that I mentioned before? And the second is to involve your people and gather the perspectives of your people being your team members, your leadership team, your clients as well, and maybe even your suppliers if you have a product business. Involving them early, not after the decisions are locked in, but as you are crafting the change narrative. And what that will allow you to do as a leader is it will allow you to give them ownership over their little piece of change and for them to drive the change within their domain, whether we're talking about a department manager leading change within their department, or whether we're talking about your customers maybe having a say in the change that is coming. Even the simple act of asking for feedback and insights is going to do wonders for the change management element. Because if we have to do change management, it's already too late. We have to do that proactively at the beginning. And the next element that I probably would recommend leaders do when it comes to change is look at the 80-20 rule. So you want to be able to identify, out of what we're about to change, what is the 20% that is going to give me 80% of the uplift. and focus on changing only that. It's going to be really tempted to try and change everything, but that just creates a lot of parallel chaos, a lot of projects going at once, and most likely a lot of those projects are not going to go to completion because it's too much. So focusing on the 20%, if we're talking about a new software, for example, what are the 20% actions? What's the core data flow that I need the software to deliver? Is it customer onboarding, followed by scheduling, following by service delivery, followed by billing and invoicing? How can I make sure the 20% of what I need is there and we only change that so that my team stays focused on maybe not small, but focused and impactful changes? And the very last element that I want to bring to the table is we know that there's going to be, it's part of the natural human behavior to be shaken by change. And naturally, different individuals will resist change a little bit more or embrace change a little bit more, depending on their personality. But even myself, I love change. Sometimes something shifts in my work or in a software that I'm utilizing, and I have that little moment of, ooh, this is different. This button was there and now it's here. What is going on? And so accepting that that is the case and embracing that that is the case and preparing ourselves for it. One of the tools we use a lot with our clients is the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it's a little framework that helps us reframe change and almost treat it as if it was a process of grieving, because that's what it actually is. You have a human being that is grieving the way things were, very comfortable, very familiar. Maybe they took a little bit longer to get done. Maybe it was a little bit inconvenient, but it was familiar. And now I have to grieve the loss of what was and create space and emptiness to allow what the new process is, what the new software is, to come in, and I have to accept it. And there is a process of resistance, anger, denial, followed by acceptance, and eventually embracing that change. And if I circle back right to the beginning, if we're very clear on why the change matters and we involve our people early, they're going to go through that curve, that roller coaster, a little bit faster and with a little bit less peaks and troughs, shall we say.
Nice. I was going to ask about that. No matter how strong the plan is, there's always going to be some unknowns that turn up post change. Yes. And with any new gains, there's going to be some new pains that come alongside it. When implementing change that impacts, in my experience, for instance, it's been in call centers where a change could impact 500 people. It can create all of those emotions you was talking about, like the morning process. As leaders, though, sometimes we have to be we always have to be empathetic for our team members, but we have to listen to those pains, and it can be sometimes overwhelming when you've got a significant number of people maybe who have got new pains, and for them, they're venting and airing the new struggles, and that's obviously not the end of the process. It's the start of the new world that they're working within. But for the leaders that are bearing the brunt of complaints or frustrations from team members, what do you recommend they do to process that so they can keep their resilience high, so they're not drawn down by the negativity of change that sometimes could flow through an organization for a week or a month or a quarter?
Yes, a week, a month, a quarter, sometimes longer. It's a very good question, and it's a very interesting angle that you bring to the table. What I would challenge that slightly, if I may, is if we have one leader who is having a high amount of individuals in their team coming to them with those heightened change emotions and frustration, it tells me two things. One, effort to change, and two, so we didn't potentially communicate why that change could happen. We didn't involve our team. And two, I would challenge that leader to ask, are you trusting your executive level, your management level? Are you trusting your 2IC, your second in commands for the different departments? And are you empowering them to lead their own team and carry some of that brunt of those emotions so that they don't reach the leader at the top and that emotional load is shared? Those are probably the two things I would pay attention to. Now, as far as tactical suggestions, even holding group meetings, group session, team-wide exercises, they need to be carefully managed not to turn into heated conversation about the change that's coming. So yes, we need some skills to manage the room and the levels of energy in the room, but creating those opportunities to have those conversations, to bring the issues to the table. And in that room, I would recommend to have an individual, again, look at your management team, look at your executive leaders. Who can you trust to help you carry that? So it's not yourself as a leader doing it on your own. You want a person, they don't need to be technically skilled, but they do need to have an element of perceptiveness and being able to separate what is a genuine issue that is being raised that we want to work into the way we're designing our system, and what is a resistance, a complaint, a situation in which the ego of the person who is making the complaint is showing up and feeling under attack, under stress, and reacting to the change. Because sometimes as leaders, because we receive all of those emotions and all of those complaints, we run the risk of treating all of the complaints as if they were that second kind that we need to manage, but we don't really need to do something. It's just our team complaining about change. But actually hidden within those, there's going to be a few issues that are going to pop up as part of this change that we want to be able to separate and say, actually, sifting through the sand, those three are actually valid concerns, and we're going to have to redesign this part of the system to maybe produce more visibility. Maybe something's not visible then should be visible, or maybe there is a oversimplification of a process because we want efficiency. We try to oversimplify it, and now we need to go back to less automation, less simplification, and more nuance and more options. So that's probably my recommendation. I'm going to sneak in another one: cadence. Not having the conversation once, not listening to your people only once, and then ticking the box. We need cadence. 1 week, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months after, let's say, going live with a new system. We need to keep that feedback loop going.
Nice. The world has changed over the last 5-6 years when it comes to change management, because 6 years ago, we could most of the time guarantee everyone was in the office. There obviously still was hybrid and remote environments there, but there's a lot more of those now. Can I ask, Val, what recommendations or what works and doesn't work when some enterprises are back to office, some are hybrid, and some are fully remote? What do you do different, or what do you recommend people should do different when it comes to communication and change management based on the working environment setup?
Not that much would be probably my cheeky answer. The tool might change. We might have a conversation over a camera, over a laptop, as opposed to an in-person conversation. But that's just the tool that delivers the language across. The conversation itself doesn't change. Probably, I see a lot of resistance in the clients that come to us, a lot of resistance from teams to going back into the office when they got used to working from home. And equally so, right at the beginning, we had some concerns about working from home when we were used to being in the office. So again, it's about the change. It's not really about the tool. I don't know that I would have specific recommendations for. I'd probably say the biggest thing is do not treat it any differently. It's still a human to human conversation.
Nice.
You're still dealing with an emotional journey that someone is going through. And we still want to be able to set aside the tech, set aside the tool, and set aside the hierarchy of a business and be able to have a conversation. And to a degree, that is either part of a business's culture, part of a business leader's ethos and way of presenting, or not.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Now, one of the other things when it comes to change, in my experience, more so on the enterprise side of life, is sometimes it can feel there's change implemented, it doesn't work, and then there's more change implemented, and it doesn't work, and you can get stuck in a little bit of a cycle. So to avoid that, Val, what would be your top tips for future-proofed business systems so that the change does work? What are those foundational principles that does ensure you are future-proofing right from the start of the project or initiative?
Foundational, and I know I have said it a few times today already, but really being clear on the why, documenting the why, documenting our North Star, not just the steps, the things we are going to change, but specifically why are we changing? It's really about designing what questions do we need to answer, what decisions do we need to take, what data is going to allow us to answer those questions and take those decisions before we make any of the changes. And as I mentioned earlier, the two really, they don't matter. It's really about being clear on what are we wanting to achieve and what's the outcome really that we're going for. What are the rules we are playing by and what's the outcome we are going for? The how, the tool, the steps, they might change along the way, but the outcome should always drive us. The North Star should always drive us. And really the guiding principle that we recommend leaders always stand behind is start from solid foundations. So really be clear on how to design the system, aligning your people to the change that is coming. That's the change management piece, and making sure you have the right assets to be able to deliver on that change. Once you've got those three foundations, you can look at a control layer for the future proofing of your business. So once we've got people, process, and tech essentially sorted, we can look at the control layer. Now we're getting closer to a decision-making framework. How do we evaluate what matters? What problems do we need to solve? And how do we make sure we don't just solve them reactively today, but every time a problem shows up, we put in place a system so that the same problem doesn't show up next time. We want to be able to have a rhythm and a cadence to the business changes we're going to do. That's part of how we future-proof the business, is having a rhythm, having a cadence. I don't just change my software once, I change it and then I assess the effectiveness 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later down the line. I don't just train my team once, I train them every 3 months regularly. And once that is in place and there is a cadence and there is a rhythm and there is visibility over the different levers of the business and which one can I move? And if I move this one, this is what happens. So if this changes in marketing, then this is the flow-on effect into sales. This is the flow-on effect into delivery. And that's the flow-on effect onto the bottom line. So I'm not reactively solving a bottom line problem. I am seeing how the change in the marketing affects the whole process. Now I'm at the level of being able to build confidence at an executive level. Is my business performing the way that I want it to? Is it being effective and efficient? Can I have foresight? Is it predictable? Can I see what's going to happen before it happens? Can I see those canary in the mines? And then the very, very last layer that we see businesses who are at that stage, who are systemized, now they can start looking at the experience layer. And that is customer experience and staff experience. and partner experience and supplier experience, but typically staff and customer experience are a good place to start. And that means we can move away from being a transactional, tactical business that almost runs to the bottom as far as it comes to pricing. Because if I'm a transactional type of business, I am playing in the dollar economy. But if I'm providing an experience to my clients, now I'm suddenly playing in the experience economy, and my pricing is going to change. And similarly for my staff, and I could go on and on about this, so I'll try and wrap it up. But also from a team member's perspective, what is the experience I am providing to my staff, and how does that change the hiring process, the onboarding process, and also the offboarding process as well? There's a really good conversation to be had about that. That's what differentiates your business, and it allows the business to play on a completely different playing field. That'll make it future-proof.
You spoke a lot there about seeing change and North Star. I want to finish up the session talking about executive dashboards and why they, when effective, are not just this vanity wall that makes executives feel good, but they actually challenge the executives and gives them the quantitative transparency they're looking for. I really like what you said there, that I can imagine affects things like employee NPS as much as customer NPS when it comes to the effects of change. So could you talk us through what does the foundations and maturity of an effective executive dashboard look like, that is more than just a PowerPoint that is looked at once a week, but actually is used to either acknowledge or drive further change and iteration?
I love the word that you just used, Jay, drive. I will get to that. Funny story, we run online webinars, and out of all of the topics that we have run last year, we've run I think about 20 executive dashboards were the ones that had the most interest. So this is really, really a timely topic. And one of the temptation when it comes to executive dashboard is more data, more numbers. I want to see everything. And really, as leaders, what we want to do is we want to take a very calm, very methodical, 37,000 feet view over what is happening in my business. And yes, we absolutely do not want vanity metrics. We want to be able to get to the core of what are the data points that really matter, and align all of our leaders around the same exact signals. So if all of our leaders are looking at the same signals, the same data, and not 3 different reports pulled manually, and it takes 30 hours to pull those reports, and then at the end of the day, they all say a different number and they tell a different story. Now, if we align all of our leaders around the same signals in a very clear, clean and simple dashboard, it will reduce taking decisions based on opinions, because they'll be driven by data. And the key there is the data itself isn't sufficient. We need to understand what question is that data answering, what story is that data telling us, and what does it allow us to do. We need to be able to get to the drive word that you use so beautifully. We need to be able to look at how does the data that shows in my dashboard help me drive user behavior, help me drive team behavior, help me drive client behavior to a degree. And so typically the data that we see in executive dashboards are your financial data and all of those metrics that are very, very tactical. But if we go a few levels deeper and ask ourselves the question, what are those early signals that help us drive user behavior? Going back to what is our North Star? What are our values? How do we tie our values to the metrics that we are tracking? And how do we track not the outcome metric, but the user behavior metric? So how many phone calls do I make drives how many sales I do down the line, right? So what is the behavior of a salesperson who does a number of phone calls? What are those early precursor signals that we want to pay attention to? And to a degree, it'll be different for every business. Every business needs to answer those questions for themselves, which is what makes our life very, very fun and very, very interesting, because you can take 2 different businesses that are having the same problem, presenting with the same issue, that have a slightly different target audience, and they will end up with two completely different dashboards and two completely different tech stacks because they will answer those questions differently.
Fantastic.
It's a very fun game.
It is. And the iterations there, I'm sure, are endless as the executives start to go from moving from seeing information to building knowledge to then wanting or expecting wisdom out of these dashboards to start to look ahead. Val, this has been a fantastic session. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed going into systems and productivity. There's been few guests that brought this conversation onto the show historically, so it's an absolute pleasure because productivity and profitability mean so much to me, although I'm product at heart. And so how we build profitable product, which is driven by productivity, is integral to the way I go about my business execution. So thank you so much for your perspectives. And it's also an absolute pleasure to have someone join for the first time, probably in 2 or 3 years, from Australia again, which is also just a personal feel-good moment for me once again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks, Val. Thank you to the audience as well for listening in to another Product Coalition podcast with myself, Jay Stansell, and this time around with Val Coin from Via Technology. If you'd like to learn more about Product Coalition, please head over to productcoalition.com. Until next time, thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.